Welcome to Ash and Iron, where we dig through the ashes of history to find the iron truth beneath. Brendan Gleeson plays one of cinema's most detestable villains. His Raynald de Chatillon is a sneering, sadistic warlord who raids Muslim caravans with a psychotic grin. He slaughters unarmed pilgrims. He gleefully provokes a war that will destroy the Crusader kingdom. When Saladin finally captures him after the disastrous Battle of Hattin, the Sultan personally slits his throat and beheads him. The audience cheers. It is a powerfully dark portrayal. Gleeson plays Raynald as pure evil religious fanatic drunk on violence, a man who represents everything brutal and barbaric about the Crusades. Here is the thing Muslim historians who lived through this era would tell you. The movie got it right. Ibn al-Athir, a contemporary chronicler, called Raynald one of the greatest and wickedest of the Franks, the most hostile to the Muslims and the most dangerous to them. Another Muslim writer described him as a monstrous infidel and terrible oppressor. The film's depiction of a gleefully violent madman was not Hollywood exaggeration, it was historically accurate. But here is the twist that makes this story even darker. The film actually left out his worst atrocities, including the fact that he led a pirate fleet that threatened to burn down Mecca, and that he flayed the Patriarch of Antioch alive with honey and flies. When your real-life crimes are too extreme for an R-rated Ridley Scott movie, you know you have reached a special level of evil. And if a medieval warlord so brutal that Hollywood had to tone him down is not subscribe-worthy, I genuinely have no idea what you want from this channel. Let us begin. Let's start with what did not make it into the film, the Cyprus Massacre. In 1156, Raynald de Chatillon launched an assault on the island of Cyprus. Here is the detail that matters. Cyprus was a Christian territory under Byzantine control. These were not Muslims, these were not enemies, these were fellow Christians, Orthodox believers living peacefully under the Byzantine emperor. Raynald's men ravaged the island for weeks. They stormed churches and monasteries, stealing precious icons and gold. They set buildings aflame. Greek Orthodox monks were beaten and robbed, peasants sorted or rounded up to be sold as slaves. Women were raped and brutalized. Even the island's Christian clergy were attacked. Some reports claim church officials who protested were killed on the spot. The Byzantine governor was captured and tortured to reveal hidden treasures. This was not strategic warfare, this was pure plunder against his own people. The Patriarch torture. This one is so grotesque that people assume it is medieval propaganda, but it is well documented in multiple sources. In 1154, just 1 year after becoming Prince of Antioch, Raynald arrested Patriarch Angrier of Limoges, the highest-ranking church official in his territory, and had him tortured. The method? Raynald's men stripped the elderly patriarch naked, covered him with honey, and left him chained on the roof of the citadel under the blazing summer sun. Imagine that for a moment. An old man, naked, covered in honey, left to bake in the desert heat, while flies and insects swarmed over him, feeding on the sweetness coating his skin. His crime? Refusing to fund Raynald's military adventures with church money. The Patriarch was only released when King Baldwin III of Jerusalem intervened, or by some accounts when Angrier finally agreed to pay. Raynald was never excommunicated for this abuse of a high-ranking cleric. The Red Sea raids. We will get to this in detail later. But in 1182 to 1183, Raynald built a fleet of ships, dragged them across the desert to the Red Sea, and launched the first Christian naval assault in those waters in over 500 years. For months, his pirates terrorized Muslim trade routes and pilgrimage routes, and slaughtering merchants and pilgrims heading to Mecca. The threat to Mecca, Islam's holiest site, sent shockwaves through the Muslim world. The director actually downplayed Raynald's responsibility for triggering the final war to make Guy de Lusignan more of an autonomous villain. Think about that. Hollywood made him less culpable than he actually was. So who was this man? Raynald de Chatillon was born around 1125, a younger son of a minor French nobleman. He had no inheritance, no prospects, no future. When the Second Crusade was called in 1147, he saw his chance. He took the cross and sailed for the Holy Land as a mercenary, hired sword, looking to make his fortune. William of Tyre, the great chronicler of the Crusader kingdoms, described him dismissively as almost a common soldier. He was a nobody until 1153. That year, Princess Constance of Antioch, one of the most powerful women in the Crusader states, chose Raynald as her second husband. Her subjects were scandalized. This was a mésalliance, a terrible mismatch. Constance was royalty. Raynald was barely nobility. But she wanted him. And through marriage, this landless mercenary became Prince of Antioch. Power came to him overnight, and within a year he showed everyone exactly what kind of man he was. The Patriarch torture happened in 1154, just 1 year after his marriage, long before any prison cell, long before any justification of he was broken by captivity. According to William of Tyre, Raynald had the Patriarch seized, bound, and exposed to the blazing summer sun with his head covered with honey. The honey attracted the flies, and the old man, the highest church official in Chatillon's lordship, was thus tormented with heat and flies. This tells you everything you need to know. Raynald was not defending Christianity. 2 years later came Cyprus. The Byzantine Emperor Manuel had asked Raynald to deal with an Armenian lord who was raiding imperial territory. Manuel even offered to fund the campaign. Raynald agreed, then turned his army on Cyprus instead, a prosperous Byzantine island that had done nothing to provoke him. The attack was sudden and devastating. Raynald's men sacked towns and villages up and down Cyprus, encountering little organized resistance. They stormed into churches and monasteries, stealing precious icons, gold and silver, liturgical vessels, and anything of value. The raiders set buildings aflame. The violence inflicted was indiscriminate. Greek Orthodox monks were beaten and robbed. Peasants were slaughtered or rounded up to be sold as slaves. Women were raped and brutalized. Remember, these were Christians. Orthodox Christians, yes, not Catholic, but still followers of Christ, still people Raynald theoretically shared a faith with. He attacked them anyway, burned their churches, and sold survivors into slavery for plunder, for profit, because he could. When Emperor Manuel finally marched on Antioch with an army in 1159, Raynald knew he was finished. In a theatrical display of submission, he walked barefoot to the emperor's camp with a noose around his neck, carrying his sword hilt first. He threw himself face down at Manuel's feet and begged for mercy. The chronicler William of Tyre wrote that all were disgusted and the glory of the Latins was turned to shame, for he was a man of violent impulses. Raynald promised to behave. He swore to accept Byzantine authority. He vowed to be a loyal vassal. He learned absolutely nothing. In late 1160 or early 1161, Raynald went raiding again, this time attacking peasants near the Euphrates River, seizing their cattle and livestock. Nur ed-Din's commander of Aleppo gathered his troops and ambushed Raynald on the way back to Antioch. Raynald tried to fight but was unhorsed and captured. He was sent to Aleppo and imprisoned. He would stay there for 16 years. This is where people try to make Raynald sympathetic. 16 years in a medieval Muslim prison broke him. Surely he was tortured, starved, brutalized. Surely that is what turned him into the monster we see in the 1180s. Man driven mad by years of suffering. Here is the problem. Almost nothing is known about Raynald's life while he was in prison. The historical record is nearly silent. We do not know what his conditions were like. We do not know if he was tortured. We do not know if he was well treated or abused. Along with psychological effects from isolation from Crusader society and uncertainty of release. That is it. Standard medieval prison conditions, unpleasant. One account claims Nur ad-Din hated him far too much to get him released just for money, which explains why he stayed in prison so long. Most captured nobles were ransomed within months or a few years. Raynald had no powerful family to pay for him, and his reputation made him too valuable or too dangerous to release quickly. He was finally freed in 1176 when Byzantine Emperor Manuel paid a ransom of 120,000 dinars. Prison did not make him evil. It just put him on ice for 16 years. What happens when you release a brutal, resentful man into a position of power after that long? Raynald emerged from prison in 1176 at around 50 years old, ancient by medieval standards. Most men his age would have retired to a monastery or faded into obscurity. Not Raynald. He married Stephanie of Milly. one of the wealthiest and most influential noblewomen in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. This marriage gave him control of Oultrejourdain, strategic lordship that included the mighty fortresses of Kerak and Montgisard. These were not just castles, they were choke points, controlling the trade routes between Egypt and Syria, positioned to raid caravans traveling between Saladin's two major territories. Whoever held Oultrejourdain held a dagger pointed at the heart of Saladin's empire. The magic required King Baldwin IV's approval. Baldwin was 16 years old and dying of leprosy. He needed strong lords to hold the frontier, and despite Raynald's reputation, or perhaps because of it, Baldwin gave his blessing. Within a year, Raynald was commanding armies again, November 25th. 1177. The Battle of Montgisard. The teenage leper king led a desperate charge with only 375 knights against Saladin's massive invasion force. Raynald de Chatillon was his second in command, directing the cavalry. Against all odds, the Christians routed Saladin's army. Only 1/10 of Saladin's forces made it back to Egypt. It was one of the most stunning victories in Crusader history. Baldwin IV became a legend, the young king who refused to let leprosy stop him from leading his men into battle and defeating the great Saladin. But who deserves the credit? Including Saladin's own chroniclers, claimed Raynald was the supreme commander and mastermind of the victory. Christian chroniclers like William of Tyre gave the credit to Baldwin himself. Modern historians point out that some Muslim writers had an agenda. Making Raynald the architect of Montgisard helped justify Saladin's later execution of him. They also note that the victory depended on superior knowledge and effective use of the terrain, which would have come from local lords who knew the area. The truth? Raynald helped. He commanded cavalry, he provided military leadership fresh from 16 years of enforced retirement. But this was Baldwin's battle. Baldwin's courage. The legend belongs to the Leper King. Then came the Red Sea raids, between 1182 and 1183. Raynald conceived and executed one of the most audacious and terrorizing operations in Crusader history. Raynald's pirates terrorized the Muslim trade routes and pilgrimage routes, disrupting the vital commerce between Egypt and India, attacking pilgrims heading to Mecca. The number of unarmed merchants and pilgrims. Think about what this meant to Muslims. Mecca is the holiest site in Islam. The pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj, is one of the 5 pillars of the faith. And now Christian pirates were threatening the route. This was not just military strategy, this was religious terrorism. By February 1183, they trapped Raynald's pirates in the harbor of al-Athir. The pirates abandoned their ships and fled inland, but were tracked down 5 days later in a narrow ravine. Most were slaughtered, 170 surrendered. Saladin, who normally showed mercy to prisoners, ordered 170 executed. Saladin made a vow he would kill Raynald de Chatillon with his own hands. The question everyone asks is, why did Baldwin IV tolerate this? Baldwin was dying of leprosy and facing persistent political instability. He relied on powerful lords to hold the frontier against Saladin. Oultrejourdain was a volatile buffer zone, and few other barons had the means or the will to hold it. Baldwin IV seems to have viewed Raynald as a blunt but necessary instrument. Unpredictable, aggressive, dangerous, but capable of holding territory and leading in battle. It was a devil's bargain. Baldwin needed Raynald's military strength and his control of those strategic fortresses. But Raynald's constant provocations undermined every diplomatic effort Baldwin made. Despite the strain, Raynald's influence grew. He aligned with Baldwin's sister Sibylla and her husband Guy of Lusignan. Raynald kept raiding. 1187. The Battle of Hattin. The Crusader army, already weakened by infighting and bad decisions, was annihilated by Saladin's forces. King Guy de Lusignan was captured. Raynald de Chatillon was captured. The military orders were slaughtered. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was finished. Saladin said a king does not kill a king. Yeah, but Raynald was not a king. He was something else. Something that transcended the normal rules of chivalry and warfare. For Raynald, there was only the sword. Raynald de Chatillon broke so many truces with Saladin that he personally provoked the war that cost the Crusaders Jerusalem. One man who could not stop raiding caravans ended an entire kingdom. Subscribe if you enjoyed watching one Crusader speedrun the destruction of the Latin East. Share this with someone who needs to understand why impulse control matters in medieval geopolitics, and I will see you in the next one.